Hey everyone, it's Jajun with Gimme CrossFit in San Dimas, California, and today we're going to talk about iso-lateral training and how that can help you out not only in building strength, breaking through any plateaus, but also gaining a better control overall of your own body. And whether you're just trying to build your strength or you're an athlete, these exercises are going to help you out a lot. And what I'm going to do at first is break down my thought process, the exercise that workout that we're going through, and then we're going to show you, break down each movement and see how you can progress through each of those as well. So let's get into it. So this is a workout that we actually did earlier this week. There's a couple different variations. We'll talk about what we're doing here today. So pretty much, first of all, I should break down what does iso-lateral mean. For iso-lateral training, we're basically just splitting up our sides and working on the right side, working on the left side independently, so that once we bring them back together, not only is each side going to be a little stronger and we're going to have more control, it's going to help you lift heavier once we're working with both sides together back again. So the 5 movements that we're going to be breaking down today are going to be squats, deadlift, glute bridges, elevated push-ups, I'll show you what that means in a moment, and lunged rows. These are all very common movements that we will be practicing no matter what type of exercise that you will be doing, so it's really important to get stronger at these movements. Now, I'm going to talk real quick about scaling this exercise or this workout and how you can find the right intensity for you. Because the thing when it comes to scaling is if it's too easy, obviously you're not challenging yourself as much as you can. If it's too intense, then you're probably not maintaining good form, maintaining good posture or awareness while you're doing those movements, and therefore not engaging the muscles as best as you can either. So you got to kind of find that sweet spot between too intense, too easy, and find right where you fit in when it comes to scaling workouts. Now, usually when we start this out, I have everyone go 30 reps on each side per movement, and we kind of progress through each movement there. So for example, we would start out with the single-legged squats, 30 on the right, 30 on the left, move on to deadlifts, 30 on the right, 30 on the left, and so on. After trying this out maybe 2 or 3 times, then our members bump up the volume up to 50 reps on each side. Okay, so we're starting out 30, and then after a couple tries at this workout, then they'll go up to 50. Once they hit 50 reps, I wouldn't recommend you going up in volume anymore, because if you just think about it, through these 5 movements we got here, that's 500 reps total. That's a lot of reps. At that point, I would just increase the weight or the difficulty of the movement, and we'll show you how later on in this video as well. Okay, so first time you try this out, start with 30. If you want to challenge yourself a little more, go ahead, bump that up to 50. Once you hit 50 reps on each side though, any of the workouts that you try after that, I would just recommend you go up in intensity or in weight. And we can talk about scaling in another video there. So let's break it down. All right, so now we're gonna break down each of these movements here and some progressions that you can do to get through them. Starting out with a single-legged squat. Now, eventually the goal is to get to like a single-legged pistol squat, but we're probably not gonna go over that today. If you're just getting started here, a single-legged squat might be even a little too difficult, and honestly, for a lot of beginners, I wouldn't even recommend you to go into any sort of weighted squat. Just dial it in first with your air squat, your body weight squat. Make sure the foundation there is good. Otherwise, you're just making it more likely to injure yourself right from the get-go, and nobody wants that because it's super like you don't want to get started with a new workout program and get injured within the first week or 2, hurt your knees or anything. That would just be terrible. So we're gonna break this down. Again, if you're just getting started here, I would recommend skip the weight. It's okay. Build up that strength, that technique first, and then add weight as you go, okay? So we're gonna start from a seated position here. For those of you who do want to add weight to this, you can use a kettlebell, any form of weight, honestly. We're going to keep it up to the chest here. Because we are weighting this movement down, we're going to make sure we keep the core nice and engaged while we're in this position. The function of the core is to help our upper body and our lower body move at the same time. One way to point that out is you might have seen people do push-ups. And if the core isn't properly engaged, they might come down, push, and you can kind of see this little separation of upper body and lower body moving independently. We want them to move together. And on top of that, it also does a really great job at protecting our lower back as well and our spine. So make sure the core is engaged, especially if you're adding weight. So we're gonna start here from a seated position. As far as feet placement, we're gonna start with our feet about shoulders width apart. And you're gonna pull your feet back so that your toes are just about lined up with the front of your knees. That's just a general rule of thumb, does not apply to everybody, but it's a good place to start. When we're ready, we're gonna make sure to push hard, pushing through our heel, that's the back of our foot here, and pushing up. Pushing up, pushing up. As far as the other leg, we're just gonna keep it bent and suspended in the air. Now, if you're having a little trouble with balance and stability, go ahead, leave a little bit of that weight on the floor with that foot, but don't use it to help push you up. Remember, this is iso-lateral. We're practicing one side at a time, okay? So make sure we're pushing with that one side. If you need the foot there to balance, go ahead, just lightly leave it there on the floor, okay? So, core is engaged, weights ready, firm grip on the kettlebell, and push, and push, and push. All right. So the first part of this movement starts out with us pushing through our heel. You can feel the front of your leg engaging, and as we come up here, the hips are gonna straighten out. So our glutes, our hip muscles over here, they're also gonna engage at the top of the motion. That's gonna help straighten the hips out. We're gonna end up standing up nice and straight, okay? A couple more times for you. So that is the single-legged kettlebell squat that we're gonna do. Again, we're gonna do it separately on each side. For that movement, I would suggest that you increase the weight as you go. For example, you might start out with a 10 or 20 pound weight. As you get stronger, just increase that weight, keep the same movement until you've really dialed in that stability and the balance, and also have the strength to try going into like a pistol squat, okay? Now, the second movement we're gonna go through is the single-legged deadlift. Now, this one's gonna take a little more balance. So we don't have anything here to demonstrate, but if you have like a pole or just a wall that you can lean a little weight on and you need it, go ahead and use it. I guess going off in a slight tangent here, I always recommend, again, with that scaling, finding out the right place for you. If your balance needs a little work, don't feel that you need to practice a movement like the single-legged deadlift, for example, and not use the balance, because by saying like, hey, I don't need the wall or a pole or something to help me balance, that's just gonna increase the risk of you getting injured. And again, I always stress this, it's not fun to be injured. Okay, that's not gonna help anyone out. So if you need to dial it down, drop the weight a little bit at any time, go ahead and do so. Use whatever support you need. So the single-legged deadlift is basically practicing a hip hinging motion. What that means is we're literally hinging at the hips, just like a door hinge, right? It's coming out and in, pushing back and hinging forward, pushing back and hinging forward. In this case, we're gonna be doing that with one leg off the floor. So the leg that's coming off of the floor, we're gonna try our best to keep that lined up with our body in one nice and straight line. And push back, and come forward. Push back, and come forward. Now, there are a bit more of mechanics that go into this movement. So if you're having a hard time, I want to say it's probably best to just skip it for now until you're able to get a little more coaching or advice from somebody who has done this before. So again, most of this movement is gonna revolve around hinging from the hips. We're gonna try to keep this lower back region nice and straight. So again, we're gonna do that by engaging our core muscles here, standing up nice and straight as we lean forward and coming back in. Now, as we come back in, this motion here, we're gonna feel the hamstrings engaging here, as well as the glute muscles near the hips. Again, the glutes are helping the hips straighten themselves out, making sure we're balanced, core is engaged. For those of you doing this the first time, Again, try it without weight. Once we're ready to progress onto some weight, we're pretty much gonna go through this same motion, but just adding some weight onto it. Push back. Again, our end point is gonna be to stand up nice and straight. And if you need something to lean against, take your other arm, lean it against a wall, a pole, something to help balance yourself out a little bit. Again, there's no shame in that. It's just gonna help you better learn the movement at whatever point you're at. Another way that you can do this, if you need a little more help stabilizing yourself, is also holding on to this with two hands. Now, I would say the one most important thing while you're doing this movement, if you're feeling lower back pain, you're not doing it correctly. All right, that basically tells you that you're doing too much pulling, too much lifting with the lower back, rather than engaging our hip muscles. These are really strong muscles back here. However, a lot of the times people forget how to use the hips, right? So this hip hinging movement becomes almost foreign to people, and it takes a little more time to learn and develop again. So anyways, that's the single-legged deadlifts. If you're feeling back pain from this one, skip it. It does take a little more time to learn, so I'll try to dive into this in another video as well here. Next movement is going to be the single-legged glute bridges. Now these are pretty simple. I would actually recommend, if you're having trouble with the deadlifts, skip the deadlifts and just do more of the glute bridges, because this will help you learn the motion of the hip moving. So, we're going to be laying down on the floor. Hands are going to be down to each side. Knees are going to be bent. Laying back. Now we're going to pull the heels closer to our body. Heels are going to be as close to underneath the knee as we can. Doesn't have to be fully underneath the knees. If you're feeling any tightness around your upper legs, then don't push it, okay? So in. We're gonna try to keep them right here. And one thing to also be aware of, as people go through this motion, sometimes the feet start to slide outwards, and then you're not able to hinge as well from the hip. So just pull them back in if that happens. So when we're ready here, the regular hip hinge or the glute bridge requires us to drive the hips forward just like this. Straightening our body out. We're going for one nice and straight lines, straightening the hips out here. For the single-legged glute bridge, we're going to take this foot, prop it up on the other knee, and then go through the same motion. We're going to pause real quick at the top of each rep here before we come down. Cool. So one takeaway that I would really want you all to focus on when it comes to the hip hinge, a lot of the times people think about pushing the hips forward, which is a good way to start. It helps you wrap your head around it. But actually what's happening during the hip hinge is our glute muscles are engaging. And when these muscles engage, the role is to help straighten the hips out. So what happens sometimes is people start to focus too much on pushing the hips forward, and then you get this. That's hyperextension. You're extending out too far, and that's gonna put a lot of strain on your lower back. Okay, so again, the goal is to end up straight, not too forward, okay? And the hips are gonna help in straightening your body out there. So the next movement that we're going into is the isolated elevated push-ups. Did I say isolated? Iso-lateral elevated push-ups. And that's a lot of words. Basically what it means is we're gonna elevate one arm here so that while we're doing these push-ups, we can put more power through this one side compared to the other. Now, if you have some sort of dumbbell that you can hold on to, I wouldn't recommend doing this with a kettlebell. Like this, pretty much the idea would be one side is elevated like this. If you were using something with a handle with a grip, Make sure you have a firm grip here, keeping the wrist as straight as you can. Doesn't need to be like 100% straight line, but we don't want to bend it too much. A bent wrist like this is going to put a lot of pressure there, and you're going to end up feeling that over time. So one side's elevated, other hand's on the floor just like with a regular push-up, and we're pushing just like this. The reason why I wouldn't really recommend using a kettlebell for this is that it swings a lot, and if you're not paying attention to the balance, you might hurt your wrist a lot this way. So if you are using a kettlebell though, and you still want to go through this motion, I would just lean it down to the side like this. So now our hand, this position is elevated just a little bit, dropping into push-up position. And while we're doing this motion, we want to really focus on pushing through the side that is elevated. The purpose of this is to help strengthen that one side more than the other. And of course, we're going to be doing both sides, but that's also going to give you a better control over one side at a time. Generally, for the push-ups, if you can't do a full body weight push-ups, do it from the knees. Again, it doesn't help you out at all for you to try lifting more weights than you're physically able to, because that way you're not going to progress. You're just going to end up more likely to hurt yourself that way. So I guess while we're at it, let's just break down some general push-up form. If you're starting out, we're going to keep the hands lined up with just about our lower chest, so right about this level. Our elbows are going to be about 45 degrees away from the body here, and pretty much we're just going to be pushing out. Now if we were to take a side view, and of course imagine I'm on the floor this way, it's just easier to show you standing up. Our chest does not have to touch the floor. In fact, it's probably not going to help our push-up position too much to go chest to floor. We're going to bring our elbows back just to about slightly past our body, and that's about as far as we do need to go. Again, you don't need to go all the way back here. We're going to go back to elbows slightly past the body and then push ourselves back up there. Most of the power coming from the push-up should be in the chest muscles over here. The shoulders are helping engage as well as our triceps, the back of our arm muscles here. So that is our iso-lateral elevated push-ups. And the fifth and final movement is going to be a kettlebell iso-lateral lunge row. Now, for some people, you might have some tight hamstrings, which makes it difficult for you to get into this position. It's going to be a partial lunge position where we're going to push one foot back. Front foot's going to come forward just like we're going into a lunge here. We're going to try to keep this leg nice and straight with our body here. Let me turn this way for you. And from this position, we're going to pull. Just doing a regular row like that. Now, a couple mechanics to pay attention to while we're in this position are going to be the following. Since we're in this position and there's a lot of weight pulling down over here, we're going to make sure core is engaged so our upper body is nice and straight. While we're pulling here, when this arm is down at the bottom, just let it hang, okay? And what I mean by that is don't try to lift it up here. Your shoulders are going to get really tired really easily. With a lot of beginners, when they're just getting started out with lighter weights, they have a habit of trying to hold this up a little higher here, which is fine with lighter weights. But again, once the weight gets a little heavier, your shoulders will be screaming at you if you're not just letting your arm hang perpendicular to the floor. As we're pulling this towards the body, we're going to open up our shoulders just a little bit. That's going to help our back muscles better engage. Now, a couple points that I want to mention is that if you're starting this for the first time and you're not familiar with how the back muscles engage, I would actually recommend us just trying this out. So stick your arm out, pull it inwards, and while you're pulling this inwards, focus more on bringing the elbow back. The reason why is most of the back muscles that we're going to be engaging are going to activate when this segment of our arm is coming backwards. Most of what's elbow and down, this is going to engage our arm muscles. So a lot of times, also when someone's starting out, you might see a lot of this going on And your arms are gonna get really sore really quickly if that were the case, because at that point we're not really rowing anymore. We're doing something closer to like a bicep curl. So again, focus on this elbow here. Bring it towards the direction of the stomach and back. And also one thing you can do, if we're pulling in this direction, you can see our hand is just about vertical. I wish I had something to hold here. If I were holding this bottle, it's vertical, right? We're pulling this way. If we rotate this with palms closer to facing up, it doesn't have to be 100% facing up, even slightly diagonal. What this is gonna do, it's gonna engage part of our back a little more, but at least for most beginners, this will give you a better idea because you can more so feel the muscle that's being engaged if you start to rotate this palm up a little more. As far as benefits go, we won't dive into too much detail on that. However, if you're just starting out and you're not quite sure what it feels like to have the back muscles engaged, try to rotate the palms upwards a little more. And what that would mean for you in this position is instead of gripping the weight this way, we would rotate closer to this way. I hope that bottle kind of gave you a reference point that made a little more sense. But anyways, that is our 5 movements that we're going through with this workout. Give it a shot. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you have any questions, go ahead, drop them in the comments below. I'll try to leave my contact information somewhere as well if you do have any further questions. So thanks for watching. Again, hope that helped, and stay tuned for the next one.